Hi, this is just a quick tour of my working environment. Just wanted to have a chance to show you my layers and classes and my save sheets and my saved views and to kind of explain how I use them. Also wanted to just, it would give me a chance to communicate maybe some of my standard practices. Reason I'm really doing this is just to have some sort of continuity of workflow so that everyone working with me would be just on the same page and that the process working between each other would go as smoothly as possible. I know everyone has their own way of working with these things and making your own working environment, but if we're not all on the same page, or if you have your way and you're putting new classes and new layers in my job files, and I got to make heads or tails of it, that would just start to become nuts, especially if we're trading files back and forth and maybe you start a part of it and I continue it and then I give it to a third party. Um, that would just be nuts. So what I'm trying to do is just kind of automate it a little bit and systemize it a bit so that I can have a process that we all follow and that everyone can count on. So the first thing that I'm going to show you in this work, this is just a sample job file it's a job that's already completed. And the first thing I'll just show is my naming nomenclature at the top here. It usually has the builder's last name. This is for Bachmann. And then there's an underscore, and then the client's last name followed by the date. And just want to make sure that we always update the job date anytime we're transferring a file back and forth. Um, Next, I'm just going to go through all of my navigation panel, my classes and layers and stuff. I think the first thing that I want to show you here with the classes is just that I use classes for everything. So everything should be in its proper class. I use them all the time, and so just asking to make sure that you put everything in its proper class. If you have any questions, obviously just ask me. As far as layers go, these are my layers. I have a design layer that is meant for all 3D types of objects, so walls and doors and windows and roofs and floors, everything that's 3D would show up in one of these 5 design layers. The site plan I don't really ever use. Once in a while a job will come along where I have a site plan and I'll actually plot that out, but that's rare. But I have it in the template just for the situation where I would need that. All of these design layers will already have their um, Z height already preloaded, so that you shouldn't have to worry about changing the Z height. I'll already do that for you. Um, any 2D items like notes and um, dimensions, those kinds of things, I always put those on the, let me just show you, save sheet layer. First floor plan, those are always just in the annotations, so that's where I keep those. These 2 layers are just visual dividers to divide up the different kinds of layers that I have here. So each design layer has its own corresponding guides layer. These guides layers are really just a place where I lay down some guidelines while I'm going through the design process with a client. So I'll just show you what this house's guidelines look like for the first floor. So I'm just laying down walls. So these will provide, a guideline to be able to trace around for putting your walls down, or for creating floor slabs or deck or porch slabs, that kind of thing. So that's the layer that I use for doing the layout. So when a job comes to you, it'll either already have all of these done and you can get right into the modeling process, or you'll have enough information to be able to produce this first phase of layout. The only other 2 layers on here are the typical wall section. That's just a layer where I keep all of my kind of boilerplate wall sections, those kinds of things. I'll talk more about that later. And then the 3D items, that is just a layer. Turn all those on, turn this on, turn this on. It's just a layer that where I've just begun really to start cataloging some of these kind of things that I've used on some recent jobs, just some columns and porch things, railings and whatnot, just so that if I know that I'm going to use something that's similar to this in the future, I don't have to rebuild it from scratch. I can go to one of these resources. I just don't have a better system for cataloging them right now, and I only have a few of them. So that's all of my layers. As far as my sheet layer goes, every project is going to have basically these sheet layers. There may be a little bit of variation depending on how big the house is and how close to the boundaries we're getting because of the sheet size I'm using or whatever. But they'll always have a front elevation will almost always be on its own page. If there's room, I'll also have the roof elevation or the roof plan on this sheet. But there will be a foundation plan. These are all foundation specific items. The only reason I would have a basement plan would be to separate some of the things, like if they're going to have a finished basement, I don't want the drawing to get too crowded, so I'll put all of the basement layout as far as room layout, etc., specific items on a different sheet layer, and keep all the foundation specific items on the foundation plan. And just the first floor plan, the second floor plan sheet layer, all my elevations and roof plans usually go on an 1/8 inch scale on its own sheet layer. And then lastly, all of my schedules and my typical wall section. So I talk more about all this in another video probably. Moving on to my viewports, these are obviously just all viewports that are used on those sheet layers. And then lastly, my save views. I use these all the time. Obviously you don't have to use these, but they're just a way for me to have instant access to a quick drawing environment that I usually or typically would use. So if I'm at the beginning of a project, I'll use one of these. 0's for basement, one is for first floor, second floor, and roof. So, if I'm working on the first floor plan, the guides / space layer is already preloaded, and the guides class is preloaded. I don't have anything else on except for guides and none. They're all turned off, and the only other layer I have is this guides layer. So it's just a way that if I double click that, I can just start drawing right away with guides, because that's all I'm going to be doing on these layers. If I'm already done with this and I'm ready to begin modeling, then I would just click on, for instance, working 1. It has all those guides already turned on the guides layer, and the active layer is the 3D first floor plan. So, I would already have these would be showing, and there would be no walls or no floors at this point, and I could just use those as a guide to begin drawing all of these walls and stuff and placing my doors and that type of thing. I think the only thing I wanted to show you while I'm here, turn off that layer, put this into an isometric. There are some items that I put on these design layers that are not actually 3D. For instance, these are not really kitchen counters. They're just lines. They were probably rectangles originally, and I converted them from screen plane to layer plane, so that if I'm looking at it in a 3D or in an isometric, they're at least flat, or not flat, but they can be shown in 3D. I don't often put in counters and cabinets and all that kind of stuff, but once in a while I do if I know that I'm going to be modeling something. So anyway, long story short, I will put some lines or rectangles into a layer plane so that it doesn't mess up my models. And lastly, it would just be the model. Lots of times if I'm modeling something and I want to just see a quick model, I already have this saved view. Double click it. It just brings up a wireframe view of all of these linked layers, and then I can just use the flyover tool and the walkthrough tool and the translate view tool to get the view that I want, and then just pick which rendering mode that I would like to use. So I think that's all that I want to go over in this. If I went too fast, or if I was not unclear on something and you want more specifics about what I'm doing, just ask and I can make it a little bit more clear for you. But that's my basic working environment.